Thank you for speaking with me today, Natasha.
Oh, you're welcome.
As you know, I'm a family and collaborative solicitor, and throughout my practice, I've dealt with many separations, and I've seen the devastating effects that separation can have on individuals and families when they don't have that support and professional team around them.
Mm-hmm.
Today, I wanted to have a conversation with you about why it's important to have psychological support when going through separation, and maybe discuss some coping mechanisms for people going through separation. So I just wanted to formally introduce you. So Natasha is a clinical psychotherapist who has a private practice in Brisbane. She is an advocate for human conversations, and she's also the co-creator of The Modern Alchemista. Now, as I mentioned before, it's really important to have that psychological support going through separation. This is your area of expertise, so I wanted to ask you a few questions around this. So you'll remember the first time that I came to your office, and I walked into your beautiful office, and I was immediately at ease with you because you're such a beautiful person. And I asked you the question, what is a psychotherapist? So today I wanted to ask you, what is a psychotherapist? How does it differ from a psychologist? And how can it benefit someone going through separation?
Yes, great question. So, look, psychologists are similar to psychotherapists in some way. We're actually both interested in human behavior. We're interested in how the brain works, how people behave, how they think. The thing, I guess, for both psychologists or psychotherapists or even counselors, that we're unable to prescribe medication. So we don't prescribe medication to support people. Where we do differ is that psychologists will often work within that medical framework of diagnosis, which means that they're looking to find a diagnosis for a person, and then the way that they would focus on treating someone would be to address that person's symptoms. In my work as a psychotherapist, which is probably similar to the work that you do with clients, is that I work relationally. So I take a collaborative approach as well when it comes to working with people. For me, it's really about those partnerships where I work with clients, I help them to develop an awareness of themselves, an awareness of that situation that they might be going through, where they're facing challenges. We work on getting clarity on that, and then together we find the solutions that are really going to be beneficial for them, the solutions that are specific to them, because everyone is individual. And then with those solutions, we look at how we can implement them to overcome their challenges. I guess for me and how I work, it is a holistic framework that I work from. So I'm helping people look at the things in their life that might be conscious, but also unconscious. So we look at things like the emotional, the physical, the relational aspects. It's everything that makes up who a person is. And what I find from this is that when we take that kind of holistic approach, I can help people see things from different perspectives, as well as helping them identify any blind spots that they might be missing as well. In answer to your question, I guess, of why is it actually important that anyone going through a separation or a divorce get support, I think what we need to remember is that separation and divorce are an ending, and they really are a death of a relationship. And I think that we need to recognize that as significant. We need to recognize the impact that we have, that separation and divorce can be quite a distressing event, and there can be a trauma. And that's not something we always think of separation and divorce as, but they really are. And I think we need to be able to have the support to be able to manage our emotions and also process the grief that comes with that ending of the relationship. It's similar, what I say to people, it's like when a loved one dies, we can experience so many powerful emotions. There might be some denial, anger, depression, and finally we might move through to acceptance. It's quite similar. Separation and divorce can actually bring up a lot of those feelings as well. And when we have grief and the intensity of emotion, we often feel overwhelmed. So it's really important that during this time we have a non-judgmental space. We've got a therapist who can support us to not only explore what we're feeling, but also process that grief to help us manage it. And when we have that space, we get to feel more grounded in ourselves. We get to have more control. And once we work through those feelings and emotions, particularly with separation and divorce, we're able to make more supportive decisions for ourselves that come from a place of emotional stability rather than being really reactive or feeling really triggered around some of the events or the behaviours or things that actually are happening in the separation and divorce.
I can really see how that could benefit someone going through separation, I suppose, from a legal aspect, because if those emotions and those needs are being met by someone like yourself, they can really make informed decisions and therefore, I suppose, get a better settlement outcome.
Absolutely.
Now, as you're aware, the court system was not built to house emotions. Australia is a non-fault country, which means things such as infidelity and painful experiences that people quite often experience going through separation and divorce are not addressed. So today I wanted to ask you, what are the short-term and long-term impacts on someone whose emotions are not addressed or invalidated during a significant life change such as divorce or separation?
Look, I think what you say is really crucial because when it comes to stress, we know that divorce and separation rank in the top 10 most stressful things that can happen to us in our lives. On the stress scale, it's a 72 out of 100. So it's number 2. It's only topped by death of a child or a spouse. So it's significant. And I guess the point I want to make around this is that when you talk about emotions not being heard or validated, we need to understand that emotional pain is just as significant as physical pain. And you might have heard that before, or people watching this might have heard that before as well. But I really want to bring this home that the way that we experience emotional pain is no different to physical pain. So our brains recognize it in the same way. And just as we would never leave a cut or an injury or a severed limb, we shouldn't be doing that with our emotional well-being. So attending to those emotions and those feelings, it's not a should do, it's actually a must do. And I think the unfortunate reality is, and when you talk about the court systems or even going through a more traditional method for people who don't use a collaborative approach, they don't always get closure on those feelings or emotions that are coming up around separation and divorce. And there's lots of methods and opportunities these days. We talked about conscious uncoupling and that people might use that process where you can work through this closure. The thing is, one, that's not always viable, and two, it's not something that both partners will always agree to. And that's where I think there's such a huge benefit to working with someone like a therapist, working one-on-one, where you actually can address and manage those emotions that you feel. And so when you do that, you not only get to understand, I guess, and make meaning of those feelings and emotions, and also around, you know, what does this separation and divorce actually mean for me? You get to understand your part in it. And over time as well, you get to also break some of the unsupportive beliefs and patterns that often come up in a separation or divorce. And for anyone who's been through that, you might relate to, you know, I'll never find anyone to be in relationship with again. I'm to blame for this relationship. You know, I'm not good enough. All of those things arise and they're really important to address. And then once you move through that in the later stages, you come to a point where you may want to get some final closure. You might have residue feelings for someone, your ex-partner, other people within the relationship, your family, and you want to be able to move on from those feelings and eventually look at how you can create new and healthy relationships in your life. So there is a process to that separation and divorce. There's a lot of emotion and feelings that come up with it. And we need to be able to, I think, go on that journey and really work through those things.
Thanks, Natasha. And so, Natasha, this is my favorite question to you, because not only people going through separation can benefit from this, but anyone can, because everyone has stress in their lives at some point. So I wanted to ask you, what are some ways that we can reduce stress and also practice a bit of self-love?
Absolutely. So I do want to address the point around people, particularly going through separation and divorce. What I would want to say is that it's important to acknowledge that the end of any relationship is not a personal failure. I think that that's some message or something that comes through really strongly when I work with clients who might be going through this. So please know that it's not a personal failure. through separation, through divorce, through any times in our life where there's a life transition or a crisis, we can experience a lot of feelings. Some of those, the main ones that we feel, are shame and fear. And what often happens is that we start to blame and judge ourselves really harshly. And what I tell people is that it's not actually beneficial to sit in that place, because nothing good comes from a place of sitting in blame and judgment for ourselves. It's kind of like the same thing with the injury. It's like getting the knife and stabbing it into the wound and making it worse. We don't want to cause any more emotional pain to ourselves. And so when you talk about self-love, I think that really is the key. It's about actively choosing to practice self-love and self-compassion during this time. A big part of that, and as you know, I'm an advocate for support, is to work with someone during this process. You don't need to do it in isolation. All of those feelings of grief and overwhelm and the emotions that come with it, it's too much for one person to handle on their own. And the thing is, I guess it can be tempting to sort of isolate yourself and want to remove yourself away from the world at this time. But it's particularly crucial during separation and divorce that we not only do the self-love for ourselves, but we get love and support from our close friends, from family, it's those close relationships that are really going to be a source of comfort that can help to sustain us during those challenging times as well. And I don't believe that you can have too much support in these, challenges as well. So my advice is, seek out friends and family who are supportive, people who will be encouraging, people who are positive and loving. That's really crucial. And seek out the support of a qualified professional who can actually help you process your grief in that as well. There might also be things that you can do, later on that involve you in the community. So you might find that there are hobbies and activities that can really support you in reconnecting back to yourself and also giving you a sense of purpose in the community as well. And then eventually over time, I think, and this is really key, once you have worked through those feelings, once you are processing your grief, you can start to look at this life transition or this change and look at, I guess, even the most challenging times in our life can bring some form of advantage, or we can find the gold in even these most difficult moments. So after you have been able to process those feelings and emotions, you can start to look at some of the positive things that are happening in your life. Rather than putting judgment on yourself or blame, you can start to shift your perspective and focus not just on the ending or what you might have lost in relationship, but on the things that you might be gaining now, and the resilience that you've developed as well. And I think with these small shifts and starting to change your mindset around these things and starting to widen those moments when you have positive feelings, where you can tap into your happiness, where you can find gratitude and joy, means that you can start to widen those moments more and more, and you get to connect with who you are again and really create a new and meaningful life.
Thank you so much, Natajsa. I really love that explanation around self-love. And thank you so much for your insight today around why it's important to have a psychotherapist during separation. Thank you.